Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to 999. So we are going down this path towards the center, trying to get to this left path, and I think we'll accomplish that. And then if this ending doesn't reveal something to us, I really don't know what unlocks this section. There is this very weird feeling. I'm fairly certain that we are having epiphanies of a sort. That there is this kind of epiphany system where, because we've gotten certain endings, the conversations we've had in previous rooms have changed slightly. Particularly the conversations that happen at these points in particular. But I'm still not sure that we won't mess up in some way. So what I'll try to do after this ending is just jump to this ending and see if we can actually do that, or maybe even try and jump directly to this ending and see if we can just do that. We're right at the point where we just decided what doors we're going through. We did have a conversation that happened, I believe, in this section, where Clover told us directly that Snake had an artificial left arm, and yet we still found supposedly Snake's body with the left arm protruding, and either I skipped over new dialogue that happened there, or it seemed like it just played out exactly the same, which is weird, certainly. But yeah, the problem with having an epiphany system, if this really does have something like that, where the reality is just changing over multiple playthroughs, is the game never really told us that was going to happen, and so much of the story stays consistent that it doesn't matter. In fact, so much of the story is just not gameplay at all, that if you could go into all skip mode and skip the escape rooms and skip the perhaps dozen questions that are popped up at you, the game would play itself completely from beginning to end. Particularly if like the decisions to go through specific doors were randomized on a timer where it would just move forward without you. And I guess that is something that the Telltale games implemented a lot of, where silence was just an option and there was a response timer. Now, some of those Telltale games didn't really give you enough time to think things through, and it would have been nice in a lot of those games to simply pause that timer and think things over. Let's see. We did also kind of confirm that it seems like Snake knows there are secret passages. That doesn't inherently mean that Snake is Zero, but he does clearly know about the secret passages, whereas Clover would have been in the Nevada experiment group, so she would have been in a different facility. So unless she telepathically received the answer as far as to where secret passages are, she doesn't know them. It still is very questionable, though, why Snake and Clover wouldn't work together and disappear at the same time, or fake their deaths at the same time. Let's keep the story going.
Be careful. We should get going as well.
So we're going through door 6, which clearly in the last ending that we got through here was you can't let Santa go through the path of door 6, otherwise he'll take the gun.
There should be a door at the end of the hall.
He'll take control of June. Although that kind of does seem like that is probably the good ending regardless, is that Santa takes the gun and escapes, and then the rest of the team find out a way to escape also.
Here it is. You guys ready?
I don't know why the good ending specifically would line up Santa as a bad guy if you wanted to have a sequel. Do you need more than one bad guy without Santa revealing himself to actually be 0. We're also not getting anything as far as the story of Santa and his sister, other than we think maybe his sister was in the previous Nonary game 9 years ago and she was the one that died. But that almost also implies that Santa was in the Nonary game, and
It stopped.
it feels like the Nonary games
It stopped.
9 years ago worked fairly different than this one, in the sense that either they were less dangerous, or this is just, the scenario somehow got very dangerous just on random bad luck.
I'd want to get used to.
Because it feels like if you kidnapped a bunch of kids instead of adults, you would assume more than one person would die compared to the 2 to 3 or more people that died in this story. Unless the author is trying to make a sense, trying to imply that children in the Nonary game 9 years ago had just an inherent better attitude towards cooperation and working together, and perhaps less of an understanding of the danger.
This door looks
It would be particularly hard to convince a 9-year-old to be as precautious as they should be in a dangerous situation. It's particularly hard to convince kids of that in real life, let alone in a Jigsaw-style death trap. This was a very big puzzle.
Whoa, what the hell is this?
We're just going to want to try and get through all of this as fast as possible, so I think we probably should go through all skip mode, right? Because there's one key that we want to make sure we get, and then another key in the next escape room that we want to make sure we get. And let's see, so let's just skip through all of this, even though we've only really seen this story once, and it probably wouldn't hurt to go through this a second time. So, Steam Engine Room. And I'm just going to try and click everything. And it does seem like also there's a decent amount of things that it can be clicked on multiple times. Until you kind of confirm that everything has been clicked on. Some of these you can't even click multiple times, interestingly enough. So you can't even kind of spam this. Yeah, we did kind of realize that 7 might have a bit of a drinking problem. I don't know if that really means anything. No. Like, the only thing we really didn't click on was this door. And in this path we haven't seen any other light switches. So I feel like the game has, not light switches, but sconces, light bulbs hanging around. Like you see them, you kind of see them around here, but can't click on them. They don't seem like anything. And then you get into some weirdness on this side, where you can get on the other side of this and get a different perspective that doesn't really make sense. Because is this a different gear? No, this is the same gear. But then there's this small door on the tunnel, apparently on both sides. Seems like they're just reusing the art. And I'm just trying to click on everything just to be certain I'm not missing anything. And there's really no time limit here. It feels like there might be better if there was a time limit, frankly. So we pulled that down before it was ready. It did nothing. This is just like a really complicated room. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to have so many things that you can click on when it doesn't really help anything. So there's a door over here. So we can actually only go into the A door, and then there's just something blocking both the other paths. Like, I don't even remember what conversation happens in this path, other than we kind of know that we seemingly almost always get paired up with Ace, except for in the section where you just loop back in the big hospital room. And I guess at the very beginning of the game, we've gone down the path that kind of confirms that he could have not snuck the number 9 bracelet into his pocket. Although really kind of nothing stops him from doing anything anyways, because if Ace is Zero knows, I think, about the secret passages as much as Snake would, assuming that they aren't the same people. So you go through A, and then you go through B, and it's not a ladder. You could certainly climb that like a ladder. Unless there's just no room for your fingers on the other side of it. But I wouldn't imagine a Japanese person would try that. Also, I imagine in most like escape the room puzzles and jigsaw style traps, you probably wouldn't want to do something super physical. I think we didn't see that line of dialogue, and I didn't really pay attention to it, but I think he basically said he basically said that there was a round peg in a square hole on that, or a square peg in a round hole. It's funny to make the idea that this would really confuse anybody for very long. Because this really is just a puzzle. This part, at least, just revolves around wandering around and trying everything. Which makes this really feel like this should have been a earlier puzzle, and this should have been its own separate thing. You might have a better story too if it wasn't so incredibly linear. I don't know if it changes much if they solve the puzzle in, say, the very beginning of the game, in that like exquisite room, for instance, where that safe was, and then the story gave you the option to go back to that room and solve a different puzzle, or told you had to go back to that room. I could see solving a Steam puzzle here. And what conversation are we going to have here? Because this is the voiced one. He says like one line of dialogue and that's it.
June's down over by there.
Yeah, I really don't think anything Ace says is part of the key, because he's added nothing to the story.
Doesn't seem to be improving.
He seems to only act as just a logical detective who's
Well, of course not. If
completely
Shark
not
Face did
connected
better
to the
right away,
story.
You know, it'll take time.
What could be causing this, I wonder? Illness, perhaps?
It would be weird if this ending
Nah, it's gotta be exhaustion.
has something to do with June getting the fever.
She gets dropped into some weird ass ship, forced to play some messed up game.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's a lot weirder that we aren't freaking out just like her, you know?
Yeah, I kind of do think that this ending might just be the ending where June
You're saying
dies.
we're abnormal?
Yeah. We're just running around this room, solving all these puzzles like it's just business as usual.
Yep.
How the hell could you call that normal?
It really does feel like Ace
We're
is
just
zero.
guinea pigs.
A guinea pig? You mean like a lab rat? You mean we're being used for some sort of experiment?
I guess this is the only point that an experiment is even
what you're
brought
saying?
up.
Dunno.
But then you have
Does seem like a possibility.
Santa given like a direct opportunity to say, yes, it's an experiment, yes, I've been through this before, and he's either not willing to say it out loud or he doesn't know it, and thus
You know, speaking of experiments,
Santa, this seems new. So this does seem like this is different storyline now, and we haven't unlocked the key.
there was this experiment some scientists did with rats.
This is a different kind of experiment he's going to talk about.
First, they took a squarish C-shaped tank and filled it with enough water that the rats could drown in it.
Okay, so already an unethical experiment.
The tank has 2 exits.
Is it gonna tilt so that if both rats stay on the side to escape, they drown each other, but if one stays on one side, the other can escape?
Just to make it easy, we'll call one A and the other B.
This is totally new conversation, though. We haven't seen this before.
Exit A is pitch black.
Unless I just
So
skip
dark
through
even
this.
a rat can't see anything.
Unless I skip through this just like insanely quickly and really badly, this has to be new content. Now, rats probably can see in the dark very, very well.
But exit B is electrified, which means the rat can't leave through it.
So, this is getting more and more complicated.
So, what would a rat do if it was put in this situation?
A rat would probably electrocute itself several times and either die electrocuting itself or eventually learn to go into the darkness. Although, maybe not, because a rat may just scurry to the darkness anyways.
Which exit would the rat choose?
What does this even prove as an experiment, though? This is like the basic, like, natural instincts of a rat. Who cares about that? Anytime you see an experiment on animals, the much more interesting ones that get more publishing and talked about more are when you teach like a parrot how to unlock a complicated lock system, or you teach rats to share, or you're doing experiments at least in delayed gratification or sharing or something. You want to test for a positive attribute, not just test for what a rat would naturally do. This almost seems like an experiment of what can you do to convince a rat to kill itself and exterminate itself. And yeah, poison's easier and quicker, and rat traps are easier and quicker.
B, of course. The rat has no way of knowing that exit B is electrified.
Exactly. The rat goes to exit B. Of course, like I said, it's electrified. Which means the rat can't get out that way. So, after a lot of trial and error, the rat finally finds exit A.
So is this the idea that they're trying to tell you, just do a lot of trial and error on the flow and fail lots and lots of times until you can find the right exit? Is that the only message that they're really trying to tell you here?
I can't say that's very interesting or relevant. It's simply the story of a laboratory experiment.
I'm with Ace on this point.
You're right. It isn't very interesting. Yet. See, these scientists repeated this experiment over and over.
So there was some form of experiments where it seemed like the rats saw the other rats solving the puzzles, or the rats laid down enough of a smell on the puzzles that even rats who hadn't done these kind of well, as I recall, it was like they did experiments where rats solved a maze, and then they put rats who had never seen the maze through the maze, and the new rats were able to solve the maze a lot faster, probably based on smell, or maybe even some other kind of simplistic form of communication. But what I think they're going to put out here is that there's some kind of memorphic field telepathy going on, and the rats are going to get smarter and smarter and solve the puzzle without going through door B. But yeah, you would inherently not be able to do this experiment and make it seem realistic that your conclusion is that the rats are telepathically communicating, or even really communicating with squeaks. As far as the answer, it's much more likely that unless you built like totally unique exact duplicas of the maze, the rats are either scratching up the floor or adding a pheromone or just dropping hair, tiny microscopic things that the rats might be able to see and the observers of the test aren't able to see.
Using hundreds of different rats over several generations.
And I would totally be willing to believe in genetic memory to a small extent, because it does seem like that is a true thing that happens in elephants. It is somewhat reasonable to believe that there might be a way to have the genes that make up a part of an elephant's or an animal's brain that are the instinctual parts that mean would you naturally turn left or right in a certain position, have those mutate and change over generations. But I also wouldn't be surprised if elephants actually don't have any kind of genetic memory and instead just are doing something to the ground, pounding the desert flat, or in some other way putting a scent that lasts for a very long time for the elephants to find their graveyards. Or it could just be a misobservation, a mistake made by the observers. The easiest thing to assume in a lot of these puzzles is, in a lot of these experiments, when they have these unbelievable, unrealistic outcomes, is that the person doing the test was either mistaken in what they observed, or biased, or just outright lying.
This produced some surprising results. With each generation, the rats took less time to find the correct exit.
So, in this scenario here, let's just assume that some percentage, less than 0% of the rats who got electrified, either lowered their chances of being able to breed and have kids, or died outright. So they either partially sterilized themselves or died outright. That's a non-zero percentage then of rats whose basic instinct brain patterns to go through door B that are dying, while dying before they can procreate and have any offspring, while the rats that have a brain chemistry that would preclude them to go through door A on the first attempt are suffering no ill effects, and thus they're escaping and then assumedly letting them breed and have more offspring. Rats breed and very quickly, so yeah, it's clearly what a scientist would say here is it's clearly a case of the rats who in their first attempt, in their first thought pattern, in just that basic animalistic way of thinking, would have gone to door A, survived. They passed on those genes that made that rat decide to go to door A to the next generation, and so there's a higher percentage of rats that would go through door A in the next generation, and thus even in that second generation there's more rats that would likely go through door A to breed, and have even more rats that go through door A. It's simple biology and math, not psychic telepathic thinking.
Eventually, a rat was put in the tank who instantly chose exit A without even attempting to go to exit B. But that wasn't the most impressive part.
So now they're probably going to shift this story, which I think this is a fictional story, just being derived from actual maze experiments. They're going to say that all the rats everywhere now instantaneously go through door A. Again, if it's over generations and generations and you're doing it with hundreds of rats, they're almost certainly scratching up the floor. They're almost certainly marking a deep ingrained scent into it that a human would never be able to really measure. Like 1 part per billion of rat smell, rat pheromone. And the only way to properly account for that would be to build a brand new tank for every single puzzle, always. And even then, some manufacturing defect would almost certainly be introduced that could explain why one rat would immediately go through door A.
The same experiment was conducted in another laboratory, far from the original one, with the same results.
The problem I'm having with this story a lot is the jumps to the unbelievable without accommodating someone who wants to believe that there is something more realistic here. It's easy in my mind to believe that Zero or somebody would kidnap a bunch of people and create a Jigsaw-like murder escape the room game. That's believable. Somebody's that crazy, and eventually I think somebody will be rich enough to do that. It wouldn't be too hard, actually, because you could simply take what is a growing level of knowledge to make escape the room games and simply add some deadly traps on top of that. So you wouldn't even really have to be a billionaire to buy some used up escape the room sets, decorations, puzzles, and then kidnap people and put it in there. It's less believable, but still believable, that a pharmaceutical company would have enough power to cover up the fact that they kidnapped a bunch of kids and did experiments on them. It's really unbelievable that they wouldn't just kill the kids instead of letting them go. It's unbelievable that the kids would stay silent and not talk about what happened, that none of them would talk about what happened. It's really unbelievable that someone somewhere could buy the sister ship of the Titanic and that wouldn't be owned by either a giant museum or a government in general as a national treasure. It's unbelievable somebody could take the sister ship of the Titanic and do so much remodeling and work on it and not be questioned by the workers. It's unreasonable that somebody would build that ship to sink it. It's unreasonable to believe that there was an ancient mummy person on the Titanic that caused it to sink, an ancient Egyptian priestess. It's unbelievable that she would have Ice 9 or some other form of cryogenics that kept her frozen. It's unbelievable that Ice 9 exists as a concept. Honestly, if Ice 9 did exist as a concept, that would be wonderful. It would be amazing if water stayed in its frozen form for a much higher temperature, because then we would have to spend considerably less energy to cool down things. And it probably would benefit society in a great way. We're constantly trying to cool down things, whether it's computer processors or food or just anything else, homes themselves. And when you convert water to ice, it takes like 3 times as much energy for you to raise the temperature of a solid piece of ice as the same amount of a liquid piece of cold at the same temperature. So if you have water at let's say what would be a good temperature? 40 degrees Celsius. If you have water at 40 degrees Celsius and you have ice at 40 degrees Celsius, so it would be starting to melt at that point, and then you put the same amount of 100 degree water in both of those cups, the 100 degree water will be cooled down a lot more than the 100 degree water will be cooled down a lot more by the solid ice than it will be cooled down by the liquid water, by quite a bit. You could probably see, like, I would guess, and my math probably is going to be wrong here, but I guess the solid ice would probably take it down to about, see, if it was 40 and you put in 100, it would probably take it down to take it up to about 60 degrees, where 40 minus 100 there would probably bring it closer to, yeah, I'm just guessing, somewhere around 80 80 or 90 degrees in the liquid water.
No, on second thought, the results weren't really the same. The rats in this second experiment began the trials with significantly faster times than the first rats in the initial one.
You could probably tell I'm not really interested in the story so much as more than just to debunk how it's fiction.
These rats weren't related to the others and had never even come in contact with them. And yet, they all easily found their way to Exit A as though they already knew.
So, if this was a true story, perhaps rats, like many animals, including humans, can just recognize the magnetic north. And perhaps the puzzle, the experiment in one place was pointed one direction and the other was pointed a different direction. Or gravity was slightly different, just insignificantly slightly different in that different location. You have to account for all these little factors and eliminate those little factors before you could even begin to try and make the argument that there's just going to be instant thought, spontaneous thoughts being telepathically sent to everyone. And see, this is part of the problem of the human brain. It filters out so much stuff that people see coincidences, and this is how conspiracy theories start. And clearly this author is into conspiracy theories. I won't go as far as to say he believes in them, but he's fascinated by them, to say the least. So it is so easy for people to get a thought introduced into their mind and then see that thought all over the place. So if everybody, say, was talking about cornbread the same amount yesterday as today, and you had never heard about cornbread until today, you're going to all of a sudden see that there's a lot of people talking about cornbread, and you'll think in your brain that nobody's talked about that before and that it's just this new fad, when really, no, it isn't. Cornbread being a weird choice there, but it works as well as anything else. And of course, then humans are very fad-based these days, so if everybody's talking about cornbread because there's a hashtag cornbread trending on Twitter or something, then it is very possible that people are just talking about something a lot more.
What did it mean?
Are you suggesting something like telepathy? They were passing information to one another through some undetectable medium?
See, it almost feels like Zero maybe doesn't even know the reason for the Nonary game 9 years ago, and so he's just trying to investigate this and find out what happens. Wouldn't it be weird if Ace is Zero and Ace is just a detective trying to get to the bottom of this, and he had just run out of options, so he decided to put himself and all of the suspects that he suspected were involved in the Nonary games 9 years ago in a new Nonary game? That kind of makes sense, as much as any of the other endings make sense.
How the hell would I know? I'm not any kind of scientist. I don't know what made him do that.
So Santa is telling a pretty poor story here as far as having a point or narrative.
But I do know that story's true. And if you've got another explanation, I'd sure love to hear it.
Alright, well, I just spent 10 minutes giving other explanations.
Come on, let's get going. There's still a lot here we haven't checked out. And we gotta get the hell out of here before June passes out.
Hey, wait. There's something I want to ask you.
So is there more conversation we're going to have because we have some other stuff? Because the key is still unlocked.
What?
Santa stopped and turned around.
Why did they use that tank for the experiment?
Huh?
Well, I mean, it seems like you could conduct the same experiment without the water.
Yeah?
They could have just used a dry box, you know? If they needed to motivate the rats to escape, they could have, I don't know, put some bait by exit B or something. I mean, do they really have to make it so the rats can drown?
Seems like in other paths we definitely have heard that they do need the fear of death. Sandy gave a grim bark of a laugh.
You know, the word emergency comes from the same root as the word emerge.
True, but I'm not sure that really means much.
You ever think about that?
No, because I tried to spend very little of my life thinking about how terrible the English language is and how it's very often based on Latin roots and things like that are just snobbish and ridiculous.
Huh? Well, an emergency is something urgent, often something dangerous. And to emerge means to sort of come out, or appear, or rise out of something else.
So
what's going to emerge in an emergency? Inspiration.
Inspiration?
Yeah. Think about it. When the chips are down, either you crack or your mind focuses and pulls up what you need.
I don't really subscribe to this idea. It's probably true, because it is getting to the idea of the flight or fight or freeze concept, which people really didn't talk too much about the freeze part of that. So yeah, when the chips are down, you might freeze or crack up, or you run away, or you might fight, as it were. But the problem with this trying to be a self-motivator or a motivator of other people by creating an emergency is that you are having two opportunities to fail with one opportunity to succeed. And if you wanted somebody to learn something or do something, I think there are better systems one can create to increase their odds of success. Even in the flow here, is this really a good system where you have 6 opportunities to die miserably to learn the one path to win successfully? By modern video game standards, it very well isn't. Most video games, particularly Western ones, hold your hand and they will walk you straight from the beginning all the way to the end. And if you're running into any trouble, you can just turn down the difficulty or grind a little bit. Very rarely do we have instant game overs in games, or game over patterns that end your game completely and then you have to rewind to a save point or a checkpoint. Now, visual novels are a little different, certainly, and they do seem to have multiple endings. Some of them are multiple bad endings with one good ending. Some of them are multiple good endings just depending on your personal preference. Also, particularly if you're playing like a romance dating game visual novel, I could see how you might want to just play down a path and date one girl and say, alright, that's the story I wanted. I'm willing to miss what would probably be a significant amount of content by not going down the other paths and dating any of the other girls. But this game pretty much forces you to do this. If this was a romance dating game instead of a escape the room murder trap game story, I wish there was a better way to explain that. Instead of if this was a dating game, effectively you would have to go through every single path dating each of these characters and failing to successfully woo or romance any of these characters before you could get the true love path, the good ending, which, yeah, that wouldn't really work. Even if this was a weird, bisexual dating game that the Japanese would never create. Yeah, that'd be very interesting if there was a visual novel out there from a Japanese creator that was bisexual, because they keep that very split. They have completely different words for like yaoi, yaoi is man on man gay love, and then yuri, yuri, is girl on girl love, and then they on top of that have otome, oteme, which is young maiden story. I don't know if there's a young boy, if that's maybe Bashoujo for young boy, gay, young boy romance. I don't think, yeah, because otome often is young maidens where it's a girl dating guys. So, you know, the Japanese language is very specific with lots of different categories, but I don't think that they really recognize anybody who would be bisexual so much, to the point, I mean, they barely even recognize people who are gay in Japan, so I don't think there'd ever be a dating romance game where you'd be dating Lotus and June and Clover and Santa and Ace and Seven, like, and Snake and the Ninth Man. Like, this is such a wild collection of characters. And when you look at like an otome game, all of the guy potential choices in that look exactly the same with only slight visual changes, and you maybe get a little bit more variety in the standard you're the guy dating girls romance game. And same is true for like the Yuri stories. Usually it's all the same artwork and all the same characters, just slightly different hair colors, slightly different personalities.
So in an emergency, your real potential
Man, I'm really off the rails as far as the story, though.
Yeah.
It's getting harder and harder to stick with this
That's
game.
why the rats had to drop.
This has gone
They had to be in danger.
longer and
There
longer.
had to be an emergency for inspiration to emerge.
Oh.
Sonny felt cold, the back of his head was aching, and his stomach felt strange. So, is that perhaps the reason, then, that that June has the fever? Is because they needed a emergency to happen? I mean, is that it? I mean, that might be the case. That June having the fever was the thing trying to... you just don't do anything with this pile of boxes. You just don't do anything with this. Let's look at the flow. That did unlock the key, so as far as we can tell, I feel like it's a little weird that somebody wouldn't just crawl in the tunnel and look inside. The odds of it turning on by itself seems pretty low. So you don't get a choice on pushing the button. It seems weird the way this whole thing is designed to kind of only expose the very end of this conveyor belt, and not instead expose a lot more so that the character could, or the people moving the coal inside the burners could just, you know, shovel it in a lot easier. Like, you would want, ideally, if somebody actually has to shovel anything in, I don't know why you couldn't just automate it so coal was weighed and then just thrown in the burner in the first place, or the burner has a scale on it and it just knows how much coal is burning in the first place. Like, why is this last 5 steps have to be done by a human when everything else here looks so technological. It would make a lot more sense if all of this looked a lot older and was made more with like pounded, hand-hammered copper boilers and just 100-year-old technology instead of modern technology. I don't think that there's anything more that we can do in this puzzle, so we're just gonna try and skip through all of this. And again, a major part for June being knocked out of the game, basically, and doing nothing, is because they just didn't want to have her in the story at that point. This is the one puzzle, I would say, though, where at least you don't split the two people into different rooms. So in this story, at least you have an eye on Ace and an eye on Santa if you're suspicious of them. I suppose there is an argument that might be made that June is feigning having a fever, but they seem to be... Junpei seems to be able to feel her head and see that she has a fever. So that doesn't really make sense. But yeah, if she was actually zero, if June was zero, it's hard to believe. Doesn't seem like the author wants to make that twist happen. She is much more just the woman in the fridge, as it were, the damsel in distress character. This would have been a great thing if it just started this spinning and you just had to click on a specific timing basis to get all three of them. Or, you know, you put this whole thing backwards and you say these are flywheels that spin when the engine isn't started, and you could have had them spinning, showing that there was an item to collect from the beginning of the puzzle as a hint, and then all the characters could have just said they're not willing to risk getting their hand broken by reaching in there and grabbing it while it was moving. That would even feel more like a jigsaw trap if one of the characters really did stick his hand in there and like broke a finger or broke a wrist or something. You don't have to particularly kill off a character. Although, if this is going to be a game that is inspired by the Saw movies, it really would help to have some characters die. Like, there's definitely some characters here that could have been killed off for as little as they play a role in the story. So we're gonna swap this, do this, and then do this. See, that doesn't work. Then do this, and I seriously doubt you could make any other shape. Be weird if you could. Red lines on the disc. I think they make a star polygon. These star polygon not playing any role here. Unless that was a 9-pointed polygon, which I don't think it was. It would be hard to make a 9-pointed star. You would have to basically overlap 2 stars of different shape.
Yes, the door's open.
Right. So we're now in the novel section. And I think this is going to be
All right, June.
fairly
Why don't
fast.
you go get June now?
So at this
Santa
point,
and I will keep an eye on the store.
I guess Ace is asking Junpei to...
Why do we need to do that? Even if it shuts, we know how to solve the puzzle now.
Ace
Just
or
open it
Santa
again.
is keeping an eye on each other. Ace is like keeping an eye on Santa, although I don't know why.
I suppose that's true. Shall all three of us go and collect June then?
I think the idea here is they just wanted to...
I'm cool. I'll let Junpei handle it.
They just wanted to show that Santa is a contrarian, and that
So
Ace
are you
is
only interested in being contrary?
Ace is trying to maybe leave it so that June and
Alright,
Junpei
I'll
can
go
be
get June.
together
I'll be right back.
to have another romantic line of dialogue. Even in this path, though, you don't run into too much of that if you manage to skip through a lot of it. So it's kind of hard to believe that the right
Are you
ending
okay?
revolves a lot around establishing a really high
Yes.
relationships
I'm
here.
fine now. I'm sorry I made.
Right, so I'm just gonna skip through this.
Good. You're feeling a lot better.
So he just put his hand on her forehead. He's felt
Are you
her
sure you're
before
alright?
and felt that she's had the fever. So unless she just has a drug on herself,
Oh, you're such
To-
a worrier, Jumpy. Oops,
to-
I mean, worrier.
unless they're trying to, unless she is zero and she's taking some kind of drug that makes her have a fever, that would be.
All right, let's go.
Go where?
Oh, right. We got the exit open.
Great. Let's go.
The only motivation I could think why June would be zero in doing all of this is if June just got obsessed for some reason with either Junpei and solving crimes after the person killed all the rabbits when they were in elementary school and they staked out the place, and so she wanted to relive that idea and found a real mystery to investigate, or for at some other point June got obsessed with the kidnapping and experiments. I guess that would kind of make sense too. If she was zero. Or maybe June got kidnapped and Junpei got kidnapped. There was one conversation where Junpei did kind of admit he didn't remember a lot of what happened after elementary school, so it could have been that he was kidnapped and he forgot. It could be that a lot of these people were kidnapped 9 years ago and then they were given some kind of drug to have amnesia happen on them and they forgot. I guess that could be the case.
Oh, it's.
Santa?
So this conversation happens, but there's no key point here.
What are you looking at?
It's a photo. It's my sister.
Sister?
So you get told that he has a sister.
Yeah. Kid was cute as a button.
You can see he says was as cute as a button.
She was only about an inch tall then?
And June totally derails the conversation.
Oh,
It-
sorry.
instead of letting you get
I guess
more
an inch is
information.
a little large for a button.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Why are you looking at it?
I was her Santa Claus.
Wait, what?
Again, he says, I was. You know he's alive, or at least you assume he's alive, if any of these characters are alive, so that does imply that she's dead.
We didn't have parents. They bought it in an accident when we were still kids.
I guess. Wouldn't it be funny if the accident that his parents died in was the same accident that Snake was in? But I don't know how then. You still don't really know how this would integrate Ace or June or Junpei. into the story.
So I had to be like her dad. And that meant that I bought her Christmas presents every year.
Yeah, and I don't know if I skipped through this section before, or if this is new
Christmas Eve,
context.
I'd leave the present next to her pillow.
Okay.
And the next morning, she'd come running into my room with this big smile.
Here you have a depiction of them having different rooms, even though they would have been either adopted or orphaned and living with family members, or living in some kind of adoption system that might exist in Japan. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not very good.
Look, Santa left me a present. He got me that doll I really wanted.
There's plenty of anime stories I've seen where kids' parents die, and then some family member has, some distant relative has this burden to raise these kids, and they don't want it, so they treat the kids terribly.
I'm so glad he got my letter.
Hopefully in reality it's not always that way.
She was always so excited.
Yeah, I think I may have just skipped through this
I was the
section.
one who told her to write those letters. I'd say, write down something you want and mail it to Santa. The address I gave her was somewhere in Northern Europe that doesn't exist. Anyway, she'd write the letter and stamp it and send it out.
Interesting point to point out here, that a Westerner or someone in the United States would say always write the letters to Santa to like one North Pole at the North Pole, or just one North Pole is good enough. But Japanese authors and Japanese kids would not even know where the Santa Claus lives, as far as the North Pole and Antarctica, or no, actually at the North Pole. And so they're thinking Northern Europe. And that would be... That certainly isn't how someone in the United States thinks. Nobody thinks that the North Pole is part of Northern Europe.
And then a few days later, it'd show up back in our mailbox marked address unknown.
Honestly, though, I think in the United States, though, if you mail something to Santa Claus, it does get handled by the post office, and it doesn't get returned addressed unknown. There's a whole program you can volunteer to respond for Santa Claus to those letters through the United States Postal Office.
I'd open the letters before she figured out they'd been sent back. Once I had the letter, I'd go around to a couple stores with some money I'd saved up over the year and buy her the stuff she'd asked for. It took a lot of saving, but I managed to buy her presents every year.
Yeah, this is a better story, so apologies if I skipped it the first time. But if this is new, I don't know what this really does other than to humanize Santa a little bit more, but it doesn't really reveal anything new.
But one year, her letter was different. She didn't write a list of toys she wanted or anything like that. Instead, it said, I don't want any presents this year. Instead, I want you to make my wish come true. My wish is that we'll be happy like this for a really, really long time.
Yeah, this is an important story to have
That was it.
missed.
Nothing else. But I couldn't make that wish come true. Some Santa I am.
Yeah, this is totally different than what we saw the first time. And I don't know if that's because the last time we had gone to this left path, because that's what we were doing last time we went down there. We had gone down this right path, and then we had gone down the left path, and then we'd gone down the center path. So something in these keys, in these conversations, here or here, has changed the story you get here.
What happened?
And you are getting a revelation that she died.
She died. She was killed 9 years ago.
So she was the girl that died 9 years ago in an experiment. And he knows that much, but I don't know if he remembers the experiment. Or if he just knows some side story or some fake cover-up story that Cradle Pharmaceuticals may have told him.
All right, let's go.
And then, seems like pretty quickly here, we're gonna run back into the...
Hey, what are you two doing? Let's get moving, come on!
Yeah, that probably jumps the story back
Let's go.
Yeah.
to where it was before.
Oh, you're finally back.
So, yeah, it definitely feels like it would be helpful if the sections of the story that are repeated could just have very little text in them always, or get shorter and less meandering, as it were, so that you could overemphasize when there are differences, when there are changes. I imagine if you went back and tried to play the Telltale game, like the first Walking Dead Telltale game, a second time, you probably would find that a significant portion of that is also repeated content also, and it would be fairly boring. Be something you could do. You could play like it once, and then 2 years later play it a second time, and at that point you probably would have forgotten everything. But to try and play it back to back was definitely not something I wanted to do when I played the Telltale games. I wanted to just have my story and live with my decisions. I think the Telltale games in particular were very good about instilling the feeling of these are your decisions and you should just live with them and you should be just happy with them, instead of wanting to save scum and go back and back. There also wasn't like a save feature really in the Telltale games anyways, so you couldn't save scum. Not very easily.
Is this a warehouse?
No, I believe this is the cargo room. This must be where they store all of this vessel's freight.
So now we're in the other escape room, or we're about to in the escape room. We have to find one more key.
There are wooden crates everywhere.
Well, we probably ought to start with finding the exit, right? Let's get going.
So my thought here, more than anything else, is that seek out a room and find all of the collectibles, the little cards that are in the that have pictures of the characters. Like, that puzzle feels like it should have probably been at the beginning of the game. It wouldn't even surprise me too much if this is gonna be a nightmare, isn't it? If they had decided to start the game where you weren't wearing bracelets and you have to put them on yourself. So the only real thing you couldn't do here is, so the first two suspects, yeah, if your first puzzle was to open these using the pictures, you wouldn't know what number to use, so you probably would want to start with everybody wearing the bracelets. It also does just eliminate a conversation that would have happened anyways, where people would have argued and not want to put the bracelets on. You have this whole conversation where June thinks she's ugly. And by anime style she's plain, but that's about it. I wonder if maybe back at the very beginning, if you had clicked on a bunch of lights, that would have somehow opened another secret passage. I wonder what his deal was. You just don't get an idea at all as far as what the ninth man's story was. So they find out that the fence is electrified. It's a little hard to run electricity on a ship, I imagine, because you don't have a ground per se. So I don't know if they have to connect the electricity to a ground of the sea, or if they just try to neutralize all the electricity in the entirety of the ship using neutral wires. All the boxes have numbers on them. Do they? Oh. He's been down picking up something that had been sitting next to the box. Junbei, take a look at this. Cards. So, Lotus is card. Man, her hair is ridiculous. It's like clay or something. So that's the pot to the kettle. So do we now have all 9 cards? The interesting outcome here in the ace is on this side and everybody else is on this side. In the order in which I picked people, I think was not ace but actually snake first. So how it decided to put ace on that side, I don't know. It would be funny if how you pick up these things determines the outcome of the game, but that would be insane too.
Now we finally have all 9 picture cards. We just need to insert these cards into the slots at the front of each box.
If anything, this puzzle confirms that Snake is the number 2, at least as far as this pace. Instead of Snake being 0, or Ace is Ace instead of Ace being 0. But it doesn't really mean anything. It's just another puzzle that Zero created.
So for instance, the card with the picture of Ace on it goes into box 1. The card with the picture of Snake on it goes into box 2, and so on.
You know what? I'm dumb. Because this is also the answer for the puzzle later on. That they're showing it to you. Yeah.
Hey, June, are you okay?
Like that solution right there that you just saw.
Sorry, I gotta go check on her.
All of those equal 15.
You finished the box thing, all right?
And that's what you have to get.
Put the cards in the boxes.
Interesting.
I'm counting on you.
So, I don't think this happened before. So, Ace didn't want to solve this puzzle. He shoved the cards into Ace's hands and ran toward June.
Are you alright? What happened?
So, is this an idea that Ace might be really dumb, or does he know something different? Junpei called out as he ran.
Can you stand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm fine. I just tripped.
She tripped. It's really weird to have a different outcome happen simply because a character tripped.
Don't give me that. Now is not the time.
But it's true. I tripped over a box.
Just let me see for a sec.
Huh.
Again, he's touching her, and if this wasn't a romantic situation, she would be totally freaking out, but she is obviously in love with Junpei.
You're still warm.
She wasn't hot like she'd been before, but she's still warm. Her fever wasn't completely gone.
I saw her fall. I think she really did just trip on something, you know?
Junpei would be more willing to agree if June hadn't needed quite so much help standing up.
Still, to fall down like that? I think she's probably still a little messed up.
Now we get that weird animation of a few frames of movement and her blushing.
Alright, well, let's just get out of here as fast as we can so we can get you to a hospital.
Oh, I don't think it's anything that serious. I just need a little medicine and some sleep, and I'll be fine.
Medicine, huh?
So this is going to, I guess, unlock a more conversation.
Well, if we could get in touch with anyone outside, I'll bet Ace could swing that for you easy.
Why is that?
Ace? Why?
Is he a drug dealer?
Huh? Don't you know? He's the president of a pharmaceutical company.
Oh. Interesting. Out of the blue, Ace is the president of Cradle Pharmaceuticals.
Cradle Pharmaceuticals is the name, I think.
So now we know how Ace integrates into this. Did Ace tell Santa that, or does Santa just recognize him?
Their flagship product is an anesthetic drug called Soparil.
Is that the drug he took earlier to make himself go to sleep? I think it may have been.
Soparil. I've heard of that before somewhere.
Yeah, that was the drug he took to go to sleep, wasn't it?
Soparil. It's an anesthetic that's a gas at room temperature, a lot like how nitrous oxide is. It takes only a few seconds to spread, and even a small amount is very effective.
Interesting.
A bunch of countries quickly accepted it for widespread use within their police and military forces.
I don't know. It seems like we're going in another conspiracy direction very late in the game.
It was an effective crowd suppressant and room clearer. It was practical, ethical, and the humane nature of it made it the ideal drug. It's been around for about 6 years. They developed it from the extracts of several different roots.
So this is probably the gas that Zero used to kidnap everybody, which is just more evidence that he is Zero.
It became popular almost as soon as it was made public, with many governments placing large orders. Demand for Soparil skyrocketed, and of course that meant Cradle Pharmaceuticals stock did too.
Why do you know all of this?
I heard it from the old man himself.
So Ace has been talking to everybody else except for me, or at least been talking to Santa instead of me.
From Ace? When?
By the number 4 door at the central stairway, when we were searching the second-class room.
Okay. By the number 4 door, when they were searching the second-class room. So, wouldn't that have been way up here? Let's see. Probably should save for just convenience. Let's go ahead and do that. Just in case I accidentally do something wrong here. I want to go over here. And the 4 and 5 door, yeah. Second class cabins. So because we went down this path, it put Santa and Ace on this path, which had them have a conversation that you don't get to hear, but you get to get the outcomes of that conversation way down at this point.
Remember how Snake, 7, and you went to door 5?
Yes?
It was back then. I asked him what he did for a living, and he said he ran his own company. After that, we just started talking, and I guess it just came up, you know?
Why has Ace not been willing to talk to anyone else except for Santa? Though he's been super quiet as far as talking about himself. He's been willing to solve all these puzzles, or kind of not solve all these puzzles, but observe people.
Huh.
Are you worried about something?
No, nothing.
The weirdness, though, is in this path with the storyline, we should not, Junpei should not know anything about Cradle Pharmaceutical or the kids being kidnapped, really, and barely anything about the experiment, basically nothing there. He also should know nothing about Ice 9 and nothing about the Egyptian priestess. Could you be the president of a company and be so illiterate that you couldn't solve a number puzzle? You couldn't read? That's hard to believe. Seem to be having difficulty with the 9 boxes.
What the hell is he doing?
He has face blindness. Ah. That's the trick. He can't solve the puzzle because it's a picture of the people and associated with the number. This puzzle has been single-handedly designed to make it so he couldn't solve it. Which means what? Like, kind of means nothing, really, other than Lotus had told us about that in the laboratory, and they had just mentioned the disease and the name of the disease where people can't recognize people's faces. And we get proven that he can't do that, which I guess means he probably would have a hard time, like, recognizing any of these people. If he'd seen them before, he wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have a hard time also forcing somebody to go through the door. Although with the numbered bracelets, you could pretty easily just look at the wrist and see the number. And his face blindness is being exaggerated quite a bit here because those images showed the character's clothing. You can still fairly easily identify people by their clothing, so it really wouldn't be that hard, and you probably could still, even with face blindness, identify them by their gender. So you break the Lotus, Clover, and June out, and then that's one group, and then you have just 4 other people.
June, don't push yourself, all right?
This revelation is really nice. It's like the first revelation in this entire game that I've actually felt like was a cool thing to figure out. But I don't get how. I'm not a step ahead. I don't get how that would change any outcome or do anything different.
Yes.
Santa, could you take care of her? I'll go check on Ace. Looks like he's having trouble.
Sure.
And I can't really
What are you doing?
blame Ace for having face blindness when I'm clearly an idiot, and this is clearly the solution for the 15 puzzles, or at least it looks like it's the solution for most of it. Maybe it actually isn't. Is 7 plus 4 would be 11, plus 1 would be only 12, and 9 plus 6 plus 3 would actually be 18. So you probably would have to move those around. And even then, that's not the solution. A lot of the 15 numbers are shown here as the solution, but yeah, that actually isn't the solution, is it? I had only done the diagonals and the center lanes. So 8 plus 5 plus 2 is 15, and 4 plus 5 plus 6 is 15, and 7 plus 3 plus 5 is 15, and 9 plus 1 plus 5 is 15. But when you add 7, 8, and 9 together, you are getting 24, and when you add 1, 2, and 3 together, you're only getting 6. So, yeah, this actually isn't a solution. It's kind of funny it isn't, though. That would have been funnier, I suppose, to have the player see the solution 5 seconds before and still not realize it. Ace's back was to him as Junpei approached. The older man turned around to look at him. His face was pale and covered in sweat. So that might explain why he put himself to sleep if he realized he wouldn't be as helpful, or thought he wouldn't be that helpful, because of the face blindness. But honestly, he's an old man. He would have developed many tricks to get over this, unless he just developed it.
What happened?
Nothing. My vision has gotten rather blurry, I think, because of fatigue. I can't see very well at the moment.
So he's lying about the face blindness.
What can't you see well?
These pictures. I don't care to admit it, but I may be developing presbyopia.
Presbyopia.
Growing old is a difficult thing.
It's interesting that it seems like Zero knew this. So is the ninth man some kind of doctor that Ace knew?
At any rate, I'll leave the rest to you. I'm feeling awfully tired, so if you don't mind, I'd like to rest for a bit.
How could simply looking at cards have tired him out?
All the pixels were quite clear and each person easily recognizable. Was Ace's vision truly so bad?
But if it wasn't, what had made him so uncomfortable?
He mentions that was when Junpei remembered what he'd heard from Lotus much earlier.
Prosopagnosia.
So it's a different word. He said he had presbyopia, prosopagnosia, different disease. So either the author or the translator here misspelled things, or Ace just claimed one big word that might be very recognizable in Japanese but doesn't mean anything when translated to English to an average person. And now we're hearing about a different disease that might be rather recognizable in Japanese but doesn't mean anything to an English speaker.
Well, put simply, It means a condition where the mind can't distinguish between human faces.
Let's check the flow. We still haven't gotten the key.
In other words, my face would look the same as Clover's or even yours. So they can't remember faces, which is how most people recognize each other. That means that people with prosopagnosia have trouble recognizing even people they're close to.
Who would Ace have been close to, though, that the other person wouldn't recognize them?
Maybe he's got prosopagnosia?
Like, who here would deny and pretend like they aren't related to Ace if he can't recognize them? I mean, if any of the characters were Zero, then of course they would deny a relationship to Ace. It's reasonable that Junpei or June might be related to him, but it would have to be June a lot more than Junpei, unless Junpei is just a unreliable narrator. The ninth man could have been related to him. Could be that many of these kids are related to him. Santa could be related to him. But yeah, who knows? Like, the way this path goes, it kind of does play down the route that Santa might have a relationship with Ace, and Santa is hiding it, and he knows that Ace can't recognize Santa, so that would be reasonable. Particularly if you make a little bit of a logical leap here and think that maybe a lot of these people have had, any one of these people have changed their appearance from the way they look. Santa in particular, if his hair was normally black or brown, if it wasn't up in spikes, if he normally wasn't wearing the wild and crazy clothing, Ace would have no way of really recognizing him. Or if June, I suppose, normally had more of a wild anime look to her, and she is very dressed down, Ace would probably have trouble recognizing that. I would think you'd probably want to dress down a lot more and blend into a crowd.
Well, he looks depressed enough to have it.
Still, Junpei felt perhaps it was best to keeps Ace condition to himself, at least for the time being.
Oh well.
Like, I don't know how this condition would help any. And face blindness really doesn't affect voices, so I don't think it would be realistic that we'll get to a scenario where Ace is trying to force somebody to unlock the 9 door, and Junpei goes, fine, I, Clover, will go unlock the door and put the wrong number on it. And
time to solve the 9 boxes puzzle.
Yeah.
And
And
card is in box 1, Snake's is in number 2. I just need to do the same for the rest.
just keep on doing that.
And finally, the 9th man's card into box 9. Yeah! Oh, they opened! What the?
And inside of this, all you do is you get the pins.
I guess I'll take them with me.
It feels very much like this puzzle that you do by controlling the thing up here should have been in a different room. It's not necessary at all. And unfortunately, we did get the key, so that was the thing we needed to know. But it's going to take us so much time to do that puzzle, and then do the puzzle after that. that we're going to have to end this recording, I think, get to this ending, and then I'm going to try and just flash directly to this part and see what happens. If we can do that, or if not, otherwise we're gonna have to start kind of all the way over again, and at that point there's still, like, so far we still haven't seen the thing that would tell us how to unlock that coffin, so we're still kind of confused. Well, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.